Okay, the recording started, so I think we can start.
Отож, доброго дня.
So, good afternoon. My name is Oleksiy, and my today's election presentation, alongside my colleague Eugene Simonov, is dedicated to the possibilities to restore the water bodies after the disaster, the terror act that happened back in 2023, the Kahovka Dam, the Kahovka hydroelectrical power plant in Ukraine. Of course, this is a well-known topic in the media, has been talking about it, but the discussions have been very varied with differentiating and different positions. Of course, everybody got scared by the event. It will be honest to say that this act of terror made the largest possible negative impact harm to the Ukrainian environment out of all of the damages that happened, the forest fires, the plants and industry destructions are not even close to the scale of any other military actions on the environment that happened in Ukraine. And if should we use ecocide, the buzzword, then it fits right to this example and event. Should we have a look at the Ukrainian map, we can see that the impact of this event are across a very large area, over 2,000 square kilometers. This is the area of the former reservoir. Now it's no longer there, no more water there. And downstream, we have 612 square kilometers. So that's the zone of the disastrous flood. Within hours, very large mass of water came in, flooding and moving everything alive. And if we're talking about an example of ecocide, this is within this very area of flood, and we need to know that it's not only the living areas and settlements, because in the media we mostly can see what happened to people living in those villages, but all of these territories are the national parks, biosphere, and the wetlands of the international significance. All of the animals, everything living, even smallest living bodies living in the ground, and those living in the riverbed, all of these got moved by the water into the sea, and unfortunately, all of them died because, unfortunately, the bodies that can live in fresh water cannot live in the salt sea water. The level of water increased not only in the Dnieper River, but also those linked and connected to the Dnieper River. And next to the area, we have additional area that also impacted living organisms a lot, because that's steppe area. And this is the part of Ukraine that's the driest. And we have a rare species typical of the drier atmosphere here. And now those dry areas switched into the wetlands. That's why the impact area is larger. And the groundwater level increased a lot. At least 14 cubic kilometers of water that also filled with the pollution at the bottom of the Kahovka reservoir was spilled into the sea, and within short time the seawater became polluted and close to the freshwater. So within this very brief period of time, early June, when the majority of living bodies and organisms already have this year's young ones, but the young ones are still too young, too small, and not adapted to the environment. This is why those that were within the water all died out, everything at the bottom died out, everything in the area died out, and everything that in this area of pollution of the Black Sea and the desalinated area, that's the area that had the majority of living organisms, where they were living and spreading, and all of these died out. So the impact is not comparable to anything other that happened during the war. And we cannot even research it properly at the moment because these are occupied territories or a zone of active combat actions. That's why it's difficult for us to research, but our mission is to identify what happened on one side, and on the other side, our mission is to help everybody understand what is the scenario for future restoration, which one is the most feasible one, because the nature is not waiting for our decision. It has started uh, uh, restoring and reviving itself. So there are different options on the recovery. Of course, we have Ukrohydroenergo, the company owner of Kahovka, and of course, their single position is that the only possible future scenario is rebuilding even a larger hydropower plant and station. And we really don't like this because this reservoir, starting from the very its start, when it was very first built, had already negative impact on the environment. Large scale for cubic kilometers of water was evaporating because it's shallow and got too hot in summer, and because of that the water was too salty, too salinated, and the pollution levels were increasing. And should we talk about even a larger and more powerful hydro power plant, it will be even worse impact. It will be not a contemporary and ecologically friendly decision. But Ukrohydroenergo doesn't think so. They are lobbying this as the only future scenario to recover and restore and rebuild this hydro power plant. There are alternative opinions. Some suggest that it could be a reservoir to partially flood the territory and not flood the other one. Or maybe similar to the Panama Channel, do a cascade. So there are some alternatives, but as NGOs and nature conservative organization, of course, we are most interested in restoration and revival of the nature. And as I already mentioned, it's not waiting until we decide on anything. It's already in the process of restoration. And it seems that our position and Ukrohydroenergo's position are two polar opposites. But what's in the middle? All of the other state bodies are in the middle. When are we going to start rebuilding? It's not a fast process. First and foremost, the war should end, then we need the demining process. There should be the project design. We need to research what's left of this dam, then a new dam should be built. So it's at least 7 to 10 years when a new dam could start and could be built. Then maybe in 20 or 30 years, up until it starts actually working, nobody's going to wait until that. Economy is recovering as well. Kryvyi Rih and other non-occupied cities are already building the new water supply. Um, the irrigation, the areas that used to be irrigated using that water, now they switched to a different agricultural, and now the state funds, our partners fund, they invest into what could be recovered and rebuilt right now. And when the war has ended, and it's been years, and now we are at that period where we could potentially start restoration. Nobody will need this dam at the moment because so much has been invested into life without this reservoir and dam. And I believe that this economic feasibility is our hope. I don't believe that Ukraine as a state is going to say that our best idea, our most interesting, the most and the best and most interesting thing that could be done is wild nature restoration on this area. The state will be looking for economically feasible ways, but I believe that our task right now is to prove to everybody that this economically feasible way that we already actually started on is to start rebuilding our life without this reservoir. Of course, everybody was really shocked when within 2 weeks, this largest in its area reservoir immediately became the dry area. It was a shock. First ever event like this in the world, and that was also a problem for us because we don't have any experience to rely from other countries. How else could it be solved? Because no other country has ever faced anything like that. But for example, the cost of the water supply system for Kryvyi Rih and for Nikopol that are actually basically built and almost functioning. The funding was allocated the next day after the terror act. Just imagine, even though the society is still discussing that, and Ukrhydroenergo insists that we have no other way but having a dam back, but the very next day, the state assigned and allocated funding for a different scenario. And I believe that's a very positive sign. And the alternatives are not just possible and feasible, they are a must because, for example, the irrigation needs, yes, we need some water for irrigation because all of the south of the Kherson region used the water from this Kahovka reservoir. But that was this very project, that was the very last nature transformation projects of the Soviet times. All of the other projects like that have been already destroyed because when Stalin was back alive, all of these projects were planned and designed without the climate change realia, without the environmental impact. And that is why the majority of these projects in the Central Asia, the Far East, and so on have already disappeared. And this is the very last that has stopped functioning, the irrigation system of Kahovka, but I believe that's a positive thing because the water, as I already mentioned, that from this reservoir, because of the continuous this irrigation, this salinated salted water made the ground also polluted and salted. Back in 1960s, the employees of the National Academy of Sciences said that we are using salted water to and we're actually what we're doing we are flooding the salted ground with the salted water. As a result, the south of Ukraine has the most salinated ground. We could continue like that for maybe another 15 years, but then that's it. We would have to just leave all of this land like it happened in Uzbekistan and other post-Soviet republics. So now we need to change agriculture in a way that it could continue and stay sustainable and not only continue for another 15 years. That's why I believe that this irrigation that has been lost is good for Ukraine and for economics as well.
Next question is, okay, we let the nature recover. What will recover? Well, because there is the area of armed hostility, Ukraine cannot do anything there and implement any scenarios because one bank of Dnipro is under the control of the Russian troops and the other is under the control of Ukrainian defense forces. But the nature recovers the way it can. And at this stage, we realize that this is mainly the, well, forest, young forest, and in the beginning of June, the poplar and the willows actually have their seeds dispersed with the wind. And those willows and poplars that grew on the next to the reservoir were enough to actually spread all over the territory. So we believe this is the nature that used to be there before the Soviet time. On this on this slide, you can see the percentage of ecosystem pre-indentation. But at that time, well, it was the period of very intensive Soviet use of nature. So they had made pastures there, and so on. So what was inundated was not well, pristine nature, so to say. And if you look at the older maps, you would see not the meadows and wetlands there, but you would see the forests and wetlands there. So we can see that the nature is restoring and recovering there, and there's a chance that we see there the nature, well, very young one, but the one which existed there before people actually came there to with their economic activity. And that's great. You can see the aerial photo of 1943. This is the only very good quality picture of that territory of that period. And in the upper part of this picture, you can see a portion of the forest, which has a kind of a rectangular form. And you can see that, well, we can assume that it was given to a kind of a kolkhoz, and they just logged the forest because they needed some pasture lands and other lands. But now we can see that the forest is growing there again. And so is it all happening? I would like to thank my colleague, Alexander Khodosovtsev, who managed to take the pictures with well, the difference of about 5 months. So you can see before and after. So in 5 months, the whole territory became completely green. And many journalists, erroneously, I don't know how it happened so, but it must have been the biggest fake of the whole year after this terrorist act, when our Ministry of Environment indicated on their website that some cultures were sown on this territory, like the lupin there. But I'm not sure, but these are the young willows, so I don't know why. Well, somebody decided so. It's actually young forest, and I would like to thank my colleagues because I know that the speakers of this course also include Lana Kravchenko from EPL. She's on the picture here. And when our colleagues managed to get to this territory, I personally couldn't get there. Olena was there, I wasn't there. But when they got there, they saw a young forest, and the biggest surprise for us was n- how quickly that forest started developing. Well, first of all, because these are our plants, only 23% of the vegetation there were not the local but invasive species. Otherwise, those all are local species. And for me personally, the most striking thing is that the trees that started growing there, they reached the height of 4 meters in a year's time. Who'd think that from a seed, which is 1 millimeter or even smaller than 1 millimeter, could grow into a 4 meter tree in a year's time? So the nature has some mechanism we have not seen before. And very important events have happened this year. In spring, we have witnessed flood here. So it's not the real flooding here because the water goes through the dams of the water reservoir, through the gateways of the water reservoir. But in spring, the water which appeared during the flooding, it was accumulated in the Kahovka reservoir, and it was used um, for various purposes, but we can see that the water, well, there's no reservoir, but the water is still there, and it was enough of water this year to flood 60% of the whole territory of the former water reservoir. We understand that in the next years, this will be the same, so the most we will have the most climatically resilient forest here. I mean, in terms of Ukraine. And these forests, which include poplar trees and willows, they are most climate resilient. And we cannot even imagine a more effective forest to counteract the global climate change. It's super effective. And this is what we are trying to explain to Ukraine's partners, to the banks, which will be financing various projects. The idea to restore this territory, the pristine territory, wild territory, the way it recovers itself, may be the greatest nature recovery project in Europe. There are no other precedents like that, no other places where it could be done in the same way. And again, I would like to thank Environment People Law, EPL. They managed to organize the so-called Kahovka platform. This is a community of experts who are discussing ideas about the future of this territory. But I think that the biggest contribution of Kahovka platform at the moment is that the environmental agreement of Ukraine, the Green Compact for Ukraine, which was signed by Ukraine and many partners of Ukraine, which is available on the portal of the President of Ukraine. It's not a convention. It's not a legally binding document. It's not a treaty between the state. It's not a presidential decree, not a law, but it's a political document published on the website of the President of Ukraine, and it was signed also by partners of our country, which stipulates that the former Kahovka reservoir has to be very thoroughly considered. So to take any decisions, a very thorough independent assessment should be made. And this is the only exclusion which is in the text of this Green Compact for Ukraine. So our state has already declared at the top political level that this project should get the biggest attention of environmentalists. And I really hope that it will be done that way. And I would also like to say that what is very important is how much these ideas meet the European goals. We are now very close to exceeding the European Union. And I'm one of those Ukrainians who have been waiting for this for a very long time. And I've been trying to do all I can within my powers to facilitate the process of European integration. And I understand that we have never been as close to the EU as now. So we have to think about what reality expects us in the European Union, other legislation, other philosophy of legislation, and other reality. And this other reality, for example, includes very important role of the international agreements and compacts like the Berne Convention and its protocols, and also the habitat directives and bird directives. These are two most important directives of the European Union pertaining to conservation of nature. That's Habitat Directive and Bird Directive. And finally, the European law on restoration of nature. It's very important for us to know that the European state managed to adopt this law this year in 2024, and it claims that the huge areas occupied by some for some economic purposes should be returned to nature. 25,000 kilometers of European rivers previously fragmented by dams should be returned to their natural state. We have to have a look at the countries of the European Union. So they either have a lot of natural territories or very actively economical use territories. Ukraine is somewhere in between, and it's very difficult to imagine how Ukraine will be abiding by all these requirements. And it seems to me that what happened to the Kahovka reservoir and what is happening there right now is the biggest possible European project to restore nature. It's the biggest climate project in Europe. No one and nowhere can allocate a bigger portion, a bigger share of land and um, for these purposes. You could say that because of the problems with connection and with the problems with the electricity in Ukraine, I'm telling you all this uh, in recording. And you could say that there are other territories in Ukraine that could be used there. Yes, and they might be also taken as an example, but there are many reasons to say that their climatic feasibility for a spontaneous restoration of nature in abandoned fields in the destroyed villages and towns. Well, climatic feasibility is not as persuasive there as it is here. And that's a problem for large scale and long-term research, but we can say that the territory of the Kahovka Reservoir is the biggest thing that can be done in terms of climate in Europe at the moment. We just should let the nature recover itself. This is a picture taken 2 kilometers away from the front line in Zaporizhia Oblast. This is the only place in Ukraine on the territory which is controlled by Ukraine, where you can have a look at this young ecosystem from above. So you can take a picture of this landscape, and all the journalists, everyone who wants to have an illustration of what's happening there, come here. People still live here despite the fact that they are very close to the front lines. But I've been trying to track how people perceive these changes in a year's time. And this is probably the last thing I have to tell you today. A year ago, when this terrorist act happened, what was the rhetoric then? In Kahovka, then the ecocide, a catastrophe, we will have a desert here, and so on. And of course, the Russians committed a crime. Yes, it's true. The Russians committed a crime and the biggest ecocide in the history we know. But the nature wasn't waiting for us. And in 2, 3 weeks, when the colleagues went there first, so 3 weeks after the terrorist act, so this was basically a week after the water went away, there were young trees there just 3 weeks after the dam was destroyed. The nature wasn't expecting that. And we, EPL, Kahovka platform, our great colleague Vasylyuk from Dnipro and journalists from various countries, including Ukraine, of course, have been showing everyone throughout the year that Kahovka has not become a desert. It became a forest. And when the anniversary of the tragedy uh, happened this year, many journalists came to us, and nobody asked us to tell about the disaster. Everybody asked the same. Tell us about how nature is recovering. Tell us how important it is to give the nature the opportunity to regrow and restore. And just recently, I watched an interview with the residents of these buildings. You can see on the slide, they are now forced to use the artesian wells to water their gardens. And they said, yes, we have to use artesian wells, but they said a year ago we thought it was a disaster and we'll have desert around us. But no, we have great nature around us. And when I heard this from some local residents, I thought that that was a change in the way of thinking. And I think that the society is ready to recognize this territory as the monument to the great natural instruments that were somewhere in the background. The nature was hiding them up the sleeve, all these mechanisms in case a disaster of this scale happens, and nature managed very well. So I would like to ask you not to think about the events in Kahovka badly. What happened last year was worse than Chernobyl. It was the biggest disaster for Ukraine. It was worse than anything done by people to our nature in our history. But what happened afterwards is a miracle, which should be an example for the whole world. And I'd be happy if in a couple of years, mm, another dam in the world will be intentionally demolished with the hope that the nature there will recover as well as it recovered in Ukraine. Everyone who has already been there, I envy you. I know that Olena Kravchenko is a speaker at this event, and she visited that place many times. And I really envy everyone who has already been there, because we can be the pioneers in the center of Europe at home. We don't need to go somewhere to remote islands. We can learn something um, new, and we can share good news. We can share good knowledge with the world, staying at home. Thank you for your attention, and I'd like to confirm that you can take my contact details from the organizers of the event. I am open to communicate on this topic. Thank you.